Hi guys, this is Ms. Miner, and this is Unit 5. Welcome to Unit 5. We're almost halfway through. This is very exciting. Um, in fact, we are about halfway through all of our units for the year. We're halfway through the year, about halfway through all of our units, so we're doing pretty good. Um, Hanging in there and staying with it. Anyways, in this unit, for today's lesson, we are going to be graphing linear equations. And remember this word linear, it tells you exactly what its graph is going to look like. If you'll remember, the word line is in the word linear. And so um, that is exactly what the graph should look like when we're done. We should have a line. And the equation that we've been working with is just our regular equation that we've been dealing with in Unit 4. So let's just start out. Let's practice writing a slope-intercept equation from a line and just kind of remembering where we were before we went on break, what we were doing. Remember our formula was y equals mx. Sorry, whenever my arm touches my screen, it won't let me write very good. Mx plus b. And I really want that to connect right there, and it just won't. Let me try again. Okay. Let me try again. Y. Now my cursor just does not want to write. Y equals mx plus b, right? That's my slope-intercept equation because it tells me my slope and it tells me my y-intercept. Those two numbers, y equals blank, x plus blank. So let's go ahead and write an equation from the line. Remember, if I have a graph, what I want to first do is identify the slope. And the slope is the rise over the run. And so I have to pick 2 points off of my graph. Well, this graph is a flat line. So I have to remember something about slopes that are flat. And I remember that slopes that are flat or straight lines have a zero slope. They don't have any rise, right? And it would be weird to try and connect these two dots because there's no rise or run, so I can't really draw my little step in there. So that's something I just have to kind of remember, that flat lines have a zero slope. We're going to review that again in just a minute, but my y-intercept then would be the point where it's crossing the y-axis. And remember, the y-intercept is a point, and so this is where x is 0 and y is 1, 2, 3, 4. And once I know my slope and my y-intercept, I can go ahead and write an equation for the line. And this is the equation that we're working with. Let's do one more. Let's practice one more. Let's do number 2 over here. And let's remember how to write an equation from a line. Remember, what I have to do is figure out the slope, and then I need to figure out the y-intercept. My slope is a ratio of the rise to the run. And so in order to figure out the rise and run, I pick 2 good points on my line. There's one there, and then, I'm gonna try really hard not to touch my screen while I'm writing. And then I kind of just draw in this little step between those 2 points. And my rise then is how many boxes, right, does it go up? And this one goes up by 1, and then it goes over 1, 2, 3, 4. It goes over 4. So my run would be 4. Then I always have to remember to look and tell if my line is going up or down. And I always read my line from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And this one is going down, so my slope is going to be a negative 1/4. Then I need to find my y-intercept. So I'm just, so that you guys can see what I'm doing here, I'm going to erase my slope information. And then let's find the y-intercept. The y-intercept is always the point where the line crosses the y-axis. And so this one is right there. That's where that blue line is crossing my y-axis. And that point is located where x is 0 and y is -1. So now I can go ahead and fill in my equation. Y is -1/4 x, because that's my slope, minus 1. That's my y-intercept. And remember, if you're struggling with writing the equation, you can always start out by, where we kind of have been starting with our equations. Just write y equals blank x plus blank, and then fill in your slope here, -1/4. Fill in your y-intercept here, -1. So either one of those ways, we should be kind of getting used to now that this is our slope, this is our y-intercept, and just putting those numbers into the equation where they belong. And that's kind of what we were doing before we went to break. We were taking these graphs and we were writing the equations for the line. Oh, sorry, I was going to write y equals mx plus b again, but I really wanted to write the equation so you could read it a little bit better. Y equals -1/4 x minus 1. Okay, so there's where we were. Let's do a little bit more review before we jump into today's goal. Today's goal is to be able to take this equation, y equals mx plus b, where this is my slope, and this is my y-intercept. And I want to take this equation now. I'm going to give you an equation, and I want you to actually go ahead and graph the line. So that's where we're going for today's lesson. But let's just review really quick a little bit about slopes so that we kind of can start to check our own answers, be able to kind of check our own answers at the end. Remember, the slope is a ratio of the rise over the run. So my slope, if I have a number like 1/2, the 1 would be my rise and the 2 would be my run. My slope is always a ratio of the rise to the run. And if my slope is a positive number like 1/2, then let me just kind of scroll down here. If my slope is a positive number, I will get a positive slope, and a positive slope from the left side of my graph to the right side of my graph is going to be a line going up. It is going to be going up if my slope is a positive number. If my slope is a negative number, let's say like if m is equal to a negative 3/4 or a negative 1/2 or any negative number, if my slope is a negative number, then from left to right, that slope is going to be going down. Now, there's two special kind of slopes that we kind of have to start memorizing, and you guys are getting familiar with the idea that you might have to do a little memorizing, and it's just because these slopes kind of don't follow the rules. If I have what's called an undefined slope, that's going to be a vertical line. So any vertical line, it doesn't have a slope number. What we would say is the slope is undefined. We just write it out in the words. And you guys remember this from last unit, or we could say Ms. Minor is okay if we abbreviate it as just UD for undefined. I'm okay with that. And we remember that from last unit. But this one is a vertical line. It goes straight up and straight down. And its equation looks different. It doesn't follow the rules. It's the weird uncle. And it has a lot of characteristics of these other straight lines, but it doesn't do the same things, right? That's why I call it the weird uncle. It's related. It's just doing its own thing. So the equation for a vertical line is going to be, oh, whoa, that got away from me there just a little bit. Sorry. The equation for a vertical line is going to be x equals a number. This line that I've drawn on here is where x is equal to 3. So the equation for the line that I drew on my notes here is x is equal to 3. So the reason for that is because my x-axis, although it runs across this way, all of its values are these horizontal lines, or sorry, these vertical lines that run vertically on the graph, right? All of the x values are vertical lines. And so really, this is telling me that I have an x value on the graph. That's what that means. We've talked about this a little bit in Unit 4, but I wanted to review it again because it's very important and because I know a lot of times my students get stuck when they see an equation like that. All right, also, the last one that we want to talk about a little bit is a zero slope, and we just saw that in the last practice when we were practicing slopes or writing equations from a graph. If I have a flat line, the slope is going to be 0. If I have a flat line, the slope is going to be the number 0. And this also can make a little bit, we saw this one equation is x is, I'm just having a little trouble here. Okay, y equals 0x, and then this would be plus 5 because I'm crossing where y is equal to 5. So my equation for my line would look like this, y equals 0x plus 5. Or we can also remember that our vertical axis right here, y, all of its values are these horizontal lines that go across our graph, right? And so the other way that we could also write an equation with the 0 slope is just y equals a number. In this case, y would be equal to 5. And if we look at the way this equation is set up, 0x is just going to be 0. So that kind of goes away. We say it cancels it out. And so y would just be equal to 5. So these two lines are kind of special. They kind of play by their own rules, the vertical and horizontal lines. And we just have to kind of get used to the rules for those two types of lines. All right, so now we've reviewed just a little bit about what our graphs are going to look like once we have graphed them. I'm either going to have a graph that's going up and it's going to have a positive number slope. I'm going to have a graph that's going down. It has a negative number slope. I'm going to get a vertical line and its equation is going to be x equals a number, or I'm going to get a horizontal line and its equation is going to be y equals a number, or y equals 0x plus a number. We'll kind of see how that works as we move through this lesson today. Okay, so let's talk about our steps for graphing. I think am I missing some notes here? Let me look here. I want to make sure oh, I see. I want to move ahead here to this this next slide really quickly. Okay, because I want to fill in a little bit of our notes first before we go into the steps for solving an equation, or for graphing an equation, sorry, not solving the equation, for graphing an equation. We want to remember that the slope is, well, the slope is going to be our movement. It's between 2 points where, let's just put the word move, okay? And let's do this. Let's slide down right here really quick and just take a look at our equation here. Y equals mx plus b. M is our slope, right? The b part is our y-intercept. And The label M, I like to say they labeled the slope M because that's where I'm going to move on my graph. And they labeled the y-intercept B because that's where I'm going to begin. Oh, now I'm spelling it wrong. That's where I'm going to begin my graph. M is for where it's going to move to next. B is where it's going to begin. So that's why they use the letters M and B to represent slope and y-intercept. Over here on the side, it says the formula for the equation of a line. Let me get, is using its slope and its y-intercept. And this is what we do. We use the slope, we use the y-intercept in order to be able to graph a straight line. Now let's talk just a little bit about what the slope is. Remember, the slope is a ratio of the rise to the run. Oops. And it's going to tell us, that rise and run is going to tell us where to move to. Remember, it means, oh, my handwriting is so bad on this. Move. Okay, the y-intercept is a point. It is a location on the graph, and it has an x and a y value, and it tells us where to begin. It is a point on the graph, and we're going to start there. We're going to go to that point, and that's where we're going to start our graph. It is a location on the graph. Okay, and if you'll remember, in this location, x is always going to be 0, and y is going to be a number. Whatever number our b is, that's what our y value is going to be. But x in this location is always going to be 0. So that hopefully will help us as we start to go through these steps for graphing. Okay, so let's do some steps for graphing now. Our steps for graphing, the first thing we want to do is find the beginning point. So let's graph this equation. The equation is y equals negative 3x plus 2. So the beginning point is going to be where x is 0, and then whatever our b number is. So let's look in this equation. Here's our b number. So our point is going to be 0, 2. And that is where we are going to start. That is our beginning. And so I'm going to go to where x is 0, which is always right here on my y-axis. And then I'm going to start by counting the middle. This 0 right here is because right in the middle, right here, that is where x is 0 and y is 0, right? Right there in the middle of my graph, that's where x is 0 and y is 0. So that's where I always start counting from. And it's kind of like Battleship, right? This is 0, 2. And so I want to go where x is 0 and y is positive 2. So I'm going to go up 2, and I'm going to make a point right there at that place. That's my beginning location. That's where I start. So I'm going to erase my marks just so that this graph doesn't get super crazy. And so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay, the second thing I want to do is figure out, where does my graph move to? So remember I said, where does it move? I said we're going to use the slope to figure out where it moves. And the slope is always a rise over a run. Here's my slope number, negative 3. So my rise is negative 3. If I have a whole number, my run is always going to be 1. If I have a whole number like negative 3 or 2 or 1 or negative 7, whatever my whole number is, if I have a whole number instead of a fraction, my run is always going to be 1. I'm just going to be moving over by 1. So once I figure out what the rise and the run is, that tells me where to move. From my beginning point, I'm going to rise -3. Since this number is negative, I am going to go down 3. If I have a positive rise, I'm going to move up. But this graph is going to move down 3. So I am going to count the boxes down 3. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go down 3, and then I'm going to run 1. I'm going to go over 1. So 1, 2, 3, and over 1. And then I'm going to put another point at that corner where I ended up. That is the next point in my line. And then I'm going to connect my points, but I have to remember one thing about Ms. Miner. She does not like baby lines. Okay, this is very important. Ms. Miner says no baby lines. I have a lot of students who give me lines that look like this. They're just these little teeny tiny lines that they hand draw in between those 2 points like that. That is not okay. Do not do that. I want you to use a ruler and take a line and draw that line all the way across your graph. I got to get this lined up quite a bit better than that. Let me get my line here lined up better than that. There we go. And then I want to take my line and pull it all the way across my graph, and my cursor is not letting me do what I want to do. Oh, that's so aggravating. So use a ruler to connect your dots and get it nice and straight and right where you want it to be on your graph. Now mine's going to be super annoying and not let me delete that guy, and then maybe it will. There we go. There we go. That's better. Okay. So make your line nice and neat all the way across your graph. I want you to connect your points, but I want you to draw your line all the way across your graph. So maybe make yourself an extra note that just says baby lines all the way through the graph. Okay. Okay, so let's just recap really quick the steps that we did. I found my y-intercept, the b value in my equation, and here it is. It's this number right here, right? Whatever that number is, that's my beginning point. That's my b value. I find it's also my y-intercept, so it should be on the y-axis. I find my y-intercept, and I start there as a point, a location on the graph. And I find my y-intercept in my equation, and that's where I start. It's my beginning point, and I figure out where that location is on the graph. Then I take my slope, and I write my slope as a rise over a run. So figure out what your rise is. If my slope is a fraction, it tells me what my rise and run are, right? So let's say my slope, let's say my slope is a fraction, like, let me write a fraction number here, 1/2. For some reason, I don't know if my sleeve is touching the, there we go. No, that's not going to work either. My screen just doesn't like my stylus pen very much right now. You can see 1/2. half. Oh, let's just move on. I find my slope. I figure out the rise and the run, write it as a ratio, write it as a fraction. And so this one was -3/1 because whenever I have a whole number, my run's always going to be 1. We could maybe write that as a note. If I have a whole number, my run is 1. That might be a good note to write. And then connect your points. Once you have your 2 points, you need 2. You could go 3. You could do 3 points if you'd like. Count your rise and run and get another point in there. But connect your 2 points together. No baby lines. Draw your line all the way through the whole graph. Okay, so there's our steps for solving an equation, for graphing an equation. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to practice just a little bit. So I'm going to split screen here, and I'm going to use my steps for graphing over here, and you'll see I've kind of got just the steps set up over on this side, and then I've got a bunch of different equations that we can graph. We're going to skip over this one and this one for right now in our notes. That's writing an equation. We did that at the beginning for practice. We're just going to graph our lines here really quick. Okay, so the first thing I need to do when I have an equation is make sure that my equation is in slope-intercept form. So I have to look at my equation and make sure that it looks like the equation y equals mx plus b. And so let's take a look at this equation right here. Y equals -x plus 4. Okay, yes, that is in slope-intercept form. So we can go ahead and graph it. The first thing I want to do is find the beginning point. It is always my b number. And so if I'm looking, here's my b number, right? My b number is 4. So I'm going to write it as an ordered pair. 0, 4. That is the location of the starting point of my graph. And so I go to where x is 0 and I count up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that point right there is going to be the starting point of my graph. Once I have that point placed, then I find my slope. My slope is always the number that is paired with the x. And so this number that's in front of the x, well, when I look down here, I only have a negative out in front of the x. So what number is paired with this x right here? Well, the number paired with this x is, of course, just a -1 because there's only one x there in that equation. We don't normally write the number 1. It is not really necessary to write, but we have to remember that it's there. There is only one x there. So if I see something like that, the number that's missing is a 1. The invisible 1, sometimes we call it. And so in this case, my slope, the rise is going to be the -1. And remember, if I have a whole number like this, my run is always going to be 1, and it's always going to be a positive 1. So in this case, I have a rise of -1, a run of +1. So the next move that I'm going to make from here is I'm going to go down 1 box, and then I'm going to go to the right in the positive direction 1 box. So I'm going to go down 1, and then I'm going to go over 1, and I'm going to put another point right where I ended up. And then step 4 is connect my points with no baby lines. I want a line that goes all the way through the whole graph. And so I'm going to grab my line here and get it lined up just right. Oh, there we go. Maybe I'll erase that one. Sorry, I made 2 lines here. There we go. I want to get my line nice and straight through, and I want it to go across my whole graph. There we go. Okay, so there's my line. Now take a look at this, because remember we said that a negative slope from left to right should be going down. So from left to right, this line is going down. I have this negative slope over here, and it's crossing at y equals 4. So I can kind of check my work when I'm done. I can say, okay, well, I should have a negative slope here, and I do. So I'm kind of just checking my work to make sure my line looks like I think it should when I'm done. Okay. All right. So let's do one more. I'm going to erase my work here that I had from before. Now remember, I always want to check and make sure that my equation is in slope-intercept form. So let's take a look at this next equation. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Well, my next equation that I have over here is y plus 1 equals 1/4 x. That equation does not look like this equation. The y over here is not by itself. So I have to solve this equation. So that it looks like slope-intercept form, so that it is in slope-intercept form. So the way that I do that is I draw my line down the equal sign, and I say, okay, what do I need to do to get y by itself? Well, y has an extra hostage. So I'm going to subtract off the 1 from both sides, and these are going to cancel out. Y is equal to 1/4 x minus 1. Now I have my slope in slope-intercept form, and I can start graphing it. So if you do not have your equation in slope-intercept form, you've got to solve your equation to get y alone. So that is a very important step. Make sure y is alone. That's a very important step. Okay. Once I have my equation in slope-intercept form, then I just follow my steps for graphing right here, and I find my beginning point. Remember, it's my b number. So look over here. Here's my b number, minus 1. So my point is going to be where x is 0, y is negative 1. I go to where x is 0, y is negative 1, and I put a point right there on my graph. Then I need to find my slope. My slope number this time is 1/4. There's my fraction. Hey, it let me even write it. Good job, computer. So my slope is 1/4. When it's in the fraction, my numerator is the rise. My denominator is the run. So this time I'm going to rise, and this is a positive 1/4, so I should be going up in my graph. So I'm going to go up by 1. So I'm just going to kind of count up by 1 and then over 4. So my next point is going to be right there. And I'm just kind of making these little hops. My computer, for some reason, is having trouble letting me write on it, but I'm just kind of counting boxes over. Let's do this another way, and let's see if my computer will let me kind of show you a little bit better how I'm counting. I'm counting one box up, right? So I'm kind of making that step that we made before, where I should be one box up and then 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes over. Can you kind of see that? It makes that step between one box up and 4 boxes over to the next point. And then all I have to do is take my ruler and draw in my line. And I want to go all the way through the graph so I can see where that line goes. No baby lines. Connect those 2 points and Just use your ruler to draw a line all the way across the graph. That's what we want. Okay, let's take a look at some special cases. Over here on the side, we have some special cases. What happens when my equation looks funny, right? What happens when my equation looks funny? Let's kind of go back, and I'm going to erase some of my work over here. In this equation, let's just start with the very first special case. This equation looks like this. Y equals 2x. My rules, or my steps for graphing, say that the first thing I'm supposed to do is use my B number in order to write my beginning point. But this one, there is no B number. And so what's happening here is my beginning point is at 0, 0. If there's no number in the equation for B, then the B value is 0. So you can write yourself a note over here and just put plus 0 so that you kind of remember if there's no B number, then what's happening is your graph is going to cross right in the center of the graph where x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 0. So I'm going to put a graph up here. We're going to graph y equals 2x. Let me just find my graph here. Hold on, go back. Let's just slide this down. I have a blank graph in here, and I'm going to move it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to graph this equation, y equals 2x. Right here, and remember, if there's no number for b, b is equal to 0. So the beginning point is going to be where x is 0 and y is 0, and that is the middle of our graph. I'm sorry about my computer today. It is just having a really hard time. It's right in the middle of my graph. Okay, let's see if it will let me just put a dot there. There we go. So that's going to be my beginning point. Then what I want to do is find my slope number. My slope number in this equation is going to be 2. If it's a whole number, my run is always positive 1. So I'm going to be rising 2 and running 1. And I'm running in the positive direction. Remember, my x-axis is positive here, negative here. My y-axis is positive going up, negative going down. And so I'm going to rise up 2 and over 1. Rise up 2 and over 1. And then I want to put another point right there where I ended up. So my slope tells me where to move to, right? And then the last thing I do is I draw a line where I'm connecting those 2 points. I'm going to try and get it. I might have to move my line just a little bit because I have to, there we go. Now I'm moving my graph. That's not what I want to do. I'm going to move my line, yeah. Come on, move my line. It really wants me to move my graph, and I don't want it to. Let's lock it. And then it won't move. Okay. Now move the line. There we go. And move this one so that it's crossing. Oh, now I've moved my graph so much it's in the wrong place. But you guys can have the idea there of that's how it's going to be. I'll move my graph back where I want my graph. Well, okay. I'm trying not to make this video forever long, but you can kind of see how that works. Okay, the next special case that we had was y equals 4. Y equals 4. Remember at the beginning of our lesson, let's just scroll back here. Remember we said that a horizontal line is going to have the equation y equals a number. And so this graph is going to be a horizontal line, and we're going to have to graph it. So let's put our graph up there, y equals 4. Well, if I remember that the equation of a horizontal line is y equals a number, then this becomes very, very easy, because all I have to do is find where, there we go, I'm going to erase this line here really quick. Delete. Okay. So if I want to graph y equals 4, all I have to do is find the place where y is equal to 4. So I count from the center. I count up 1, 2, 3, 4 places. Oh, let me get my dot first. I count from the center 1, 2, 3, 4. There's my point where y is equal to 4. And all I have to do then is make a horizontal line that goes across the whole graph. Oh, and see what happens. Let's delete all of those. And let's go back to my line. And then I make a horizontal line, and hopefully this one works. There it is. That is the graph of y equals 4. So what I need to maybe make in my notes here is write myself a note that this is a horizontal line. And again, my computer is being really weird and not letting me write. This is a horizontal line. The last special case that we have, x equals a number. X equals 4. This was our special case where I have a vertical line. X equals a number. This is a vertical line, and this is something I just have to kind of remember. I'm going to skip ahead here again. Okay. So in this one, I want to graph x equals 4. So let's go ahead and take off our horizontal line that we just graphed. And we'll erase our horizontal line this time. This time I want to make a vertical line where x equals 4. And all I have to do is go on my graph to where x equals 4. And I put my point there. This time I'm counting on my x-axis because I want to go where x is equal to 4. And that is where x is equal to 4. And then all I have to do is draw a vertical line. Where x is equal to 4. There we go. There we go. And that is the graph of my line x equals 4. So we can make ourselves a note over here in our special cases that this is a vertical line. Make your notes and write it in your notes so that you have it. Okay, now I'm going to go back to our screen and let's just do, I want to make it just be, there we go. Let's graph some equations, okay? Let's graph some lines. First thing I want to do is graph the line Let's make this just a tiny bit bigger. There we go. First thing I want to do is graph the line y equals 1/2 x plus 1. Here's my steps over here. I've kind of tried to put those back in your notes for you. We're just going to do some practice really quick, and this will be the end of the video. I want to graph the line y equals 1/2 x plus 1. And so my beginning point, the first thing I do is find the beginning point. Beginning point is where x is 0 and y is positive 1. That's my B number right there. So I go to where x is 0 and y is positive 1, and that's my beginning point. B for beginning. Then I've got to figure out where does it move. And the way that I figure out where it moves is I look at my slope number. My slope number is 1/2. So the rise, and if you're doing this and you don't have these convenient notes, you can always just write out your slope as a ratio and then just label it. Here's your rise, here's your run. This is a positive 1, this is a positive 2. And so where are you going to move from your beginning point? You're going to go up 1 and over 2. And you're going to kind of draw in your little step, and wherever your little step ends, there's your next point. Put your point right at the end of that next step, up 1, over 2. And then draw in your line. Take your ruler, line up your dots. Oh, and I should have locked that in place. Let me put my graph back where it belongs there. There we go, and then let's lock that in place so that it can't move on us. There we go. Then I can take my line and I can draw my line in. Oh, I've still got this big fat line. Let's go back to a regular line here, and we'll delete this other line. It's really fat. And my mistake line over here. I'll just get rid of that one. Okay. All right, line, here we go. Draw you all the way through, and got another mistake line in there. Okay, there is the graph of the line y equals 1/2 x plus 1. Okay, let's do another practice line. A good idea might be stop the video right now. Try graphing this one on your own in your notes. Practice graphing on your own. Make sure you can do it, and then come back and check your work on the video. Okay, I hope you checked your own work, but if you didn't, then at least hopefully you're following along. We find our beginning point where x is 0 and y is -1. That's where we're going to go. We're going to put a point right there where x is 0 and y is -1, and then we're going to find our slope. Our slope in this case is -2. Remember, if I have a whole number, my run is always going to be +1. And so in this one, I'm going to go down 2 and over to the right 1. And so I'm going to go down 2, 1, going down 2, and over 1. My computer is just really struggling today. And I'm going to put a point right here where I ended up, and then I take my ruler, and hopefully somehow I can get my line like pretty straight. Oh boy. Lock you into place again, and then use my ruler. Oh, that didn't work. I'm telling you, my computer is really struggling today. It just does not like my stylus very much. There we go. Let's just see if we can get that lined up just a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so there's my line. Just ignore these other weird lines that are over here. Get your line drawn all the way through your graph. Make it look good. No baby lines. Oh, you can see my computer's not loving me. Okay. All right. Remember, if my y-intercept is not there, there's no y-intercept, then my y-intercept is 0. I'm just going to give you a few tips and reminders before we finish up. This one is going to be a horizontal line. This one is going to be a vertical line. And remember, if I don't have a slope number, but I have an x there, that means I have one x, right? So put in your invisible ones if you need to find your slope. So there's some tricks and some tips. Go through, try and practice graphing some of these. If you have questions, please make sure you're emailing me or Mrs. Zeider so that we know we can get you some help. You're also welcome to join in on our Google Meets on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. We'd love to hear from you and we love to see you. So good luck, guys.